Welcome to Live at the Blue Box. We are going to now do Input Junkie Satellite. So here's what it is. Let me set this up real quick. So Input Junkie is a show where we talk about kind of our favorite things from the week, and we talk about movies and TV and music and food, and it's just kind of a conversation. Input Junkie Satellite is the spawn, the evil spawn of that, where we do interviews or we talk about specific subjects. We've broken down like how you introduce your kids to Star Wars or things like that. Well, tonight we're doing an interview, and we have a really special interview. I'm really excited to do this. We have my dad.
That's short-lived.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm not excited anymore. My dad, George Southgate. The reason we're interviewing you is we want to talk about me. No, the reason we're interviewing you. Good. The reason I want to interview you here is you're a musician, and you've been a musician for a long time. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that. I'm just setting it up.
Boy, this is not the Inquirer.
Rowdy out there. One of the things that motivated this is we watched the movie Whiplash this week. And we're going to get to that. But Whiplash is a movie about drumming and about music schools and all that. And you've got quite a history with that. So, Dad, let's start out with, what do you play, and how long have you played?
Drums, all percussion instruments.
Okay, so, when you say drums, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can look at that.
Well, it's a lot of different drums. From classical concert timpani and snare drum and all of the accessories used it with symphony orchestras and with the drum set, different types of drum sets. I have several different types of drum sets that I don't use all of them now, but I have.
Right.
and ethnic drums, African and Indian and things like that.
Sure.
I know.
When you play vibes?
Yes, and xylophone and marimba and timpani.
Yeah. And now, with this, how long have you been playing? I mean, how old were you when you started?
Oh, gosh.
We don't have to do the math
Fourth
up here.
grade.
Fourth grade. Okay, so you'd be about 10 when you started, right?
I guess so.
10, so. 10 or 11, somewhere in there.
No, took me a number of years to get to fourth grade.
Okay. So you started at 20.
Yeah.
And now, you've been playing that long. Did you know, right away, this is what you wanted to do?
I don't think I ever knew that's what I wanted to do. My drum teacher, who was a great teacher and lived across the street, he told my parents, he said, the first year I started with him, he said it was, average kid. And he said, but the second year, something happened. And he said, I had to stand back. And
really?
Yeah.
Wow. So it was pretty early that.
Oh, yeah. I got the bug.
And did you figure it out at that point? Wow, I really love this?
Well, yeah, I figured out. I was just obsessed with doing it and doing it right.
Now, you also, I mean, this is a part of the story that's actually really interesting. You mentioned
Not yet.
You mentioned your drum teacher being across the street. You grew up in a pretty small town.
Well, it was
a college town, but it's pretty small.
Well, there were two towns connected, and both had the colleges. So it was a very unique, and I was involved in both colleges.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so that was Bloomington. You grew up in Bloomington, right?
Bloomington, Normal.
And Normal is the other town. So that's the closest you ever were to Normal. I got the joke in. Thank you. And they had.
Oh yeah, let's see how this interview goes.
There was ISU, and what was the other college?
Illinois Wesleyan.
Oh, that's Wesleyan there. So you played with both, or you were involved with both.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. I knew you were at ISU.
Right. And they made me, I was playing most of the time with the Wesleyan groups.
Oh,
And the
interesting.
dean of the university called me in one time and he said, you know, you're not playing in any of our groups. And we,
The guy at ISU said that? Like, you're playing at this other...
oh, okay, yeah, I guess I'll do that. So I was doing both for a while.
That's funny. You know, when I was... Because I played saxophone.
Right.
Obviously, it's a music house.
Very well, too.
Oh, boy. You got a spotty memory. But the guy who was the dean... I think he was the dean at Wesleyan. I didn't realize that's where he was. But do you remember that guy? He was the trombone player. And when I was up at Birch Creek, was a jazz camp. I was that kid. I went to jazz camp. He was a trombone player, and he taught up there, and he wanted me to come to Wesleyan. And his big thing was he wore a green suit, and he'd stand up and do his big featured number was he'd play
Oh, that
It
was-
Ain't Easy Being Green. Remember that
And he
guy?
was. That was a long time after I had.
So he
done
wasn't
all-
there like your time.
No.
I have no perspective. I don't know how old he was. I was a kid, so
Yeah.
But it's funny. I didn't know that you had played at Wesleyan because that was one that he was like, and he even sent me when I graduated. He was trying to get me to go there.
Matter of fact, the the guys in the Wesleyan Jazz Band made me a member of the Phi Mu Alpha fraternity.
What? You were in the fraternity?
Well,
It was like Animal House. Were you Bluto? Yeah, I think you were Flounder.
I was never at a meeting or anything.
Yeah.
It's just they said we've made you a member of the
You're
Phi
a
Mu
member.
Alpha.
Oh,
And I-
excellent.
Oh yeah, what do
Do
I
you
have
get
to do?
stuff from that? Do you get like letters from
no,
them?
no,
or
no.
I didn't know. Like if they had
I
a-
was not an active member of.
yeah, but they made you a member. It's like when I was in high school, they made me a thespian.
I was a thespian.
You were?
Yeah, I was. I had a lead role in one of the contest plays.
Did you actually joined the Thespian Society thing? Because I didn't want to, because they did this stupid thing where you had to come in and you had to dress up one day and you had to go through like this.
I didn't
dumb
have to
haze.
do that, but
I didn't do it.
I didn't want to.
I refused, and then in a program it listed me as a thespian. They're like, "Oh yeah, you're part of the thespians." I was like, "I didn't do this stuff." They're like, "Yeah, but it's not good if the leads aren't listed as thespians." So what were you a lead in?
I think it was called The Wall. I was terrible.
Pink Floyd's The Wall, really?
It was. I was against the wall. Yeah,
Against the wall.
the guy who was usually got the leads and everything. I didn't even try out. The dramatics teacher came to me and she said, "George, he can't do it, so I want you to be in this play." You know, and I okay. What do I do? You're the lead, and
I think that's the most accurate thing you've said all night. Good impression.
Talk about lost.
So you were the lead in this play.
Yeah, I was an old man.
Is that why they cast you? Because you look like a little old man then?
Yeah.
So, okay. So,
Their criticism was that I had to get up on this box to look out over this wall.
okay.
Well, when I'm done looking out over the wall, I'd have to get down. Well, instead of getting down like an old man, I'd pop down and.
So you didn't really embrace the character? No.
I don't even know how I got through it.
Well, you did, and you're a thespian because of it.
Oh, yeah.
You and Ellen. So I want to talk about that early stage still. You said you got the bug,
Yeah.
and,
I was fortunate because I had this master
well, yeah, the guy across
drum
the street,
teacher. Yeah, John Noonan. He was, like he.
you found out he was like,
I didn't know he was that famous.
yeah,
till
he was
later.
like in the drum society. Or,
Right, he was the head of the Ludwig Drum Company for a while, and he was
That's
connected.
crazy.
He was connected, and so I got to know the Zildjian Cymbal Company guys and the Ludwig Drum Company guys, and all of these people. We would
Wow.
come up to Chicago every summer to the music manufacturers convention, and I would get to meet all of these guys, and we'd go out to dinner with Louis Belson and Pearl Bailey, and
You went out to dinner with them?
oh yeah,
Oh my gosh, Louis Belson, really?
he was. I wrote him. He got sick one year. I came up and he was there, and after we had gone out to dinner the next week, he got sick, and I wrote him a letter, and he wrote back and said, what a nice guy.
Really? You know, I've been your kid for what, 46 years? And I didn't know this. So that's amazing.
Well, I was busy.
Did you have dinner with Billie Holiday, too?
No, not Billie Holiday.
I thought you mentioned Billie Holiday.
No.
Oh, Pearl Bailey.
Great lady, too.
Yeah? Hey, listen, pipe down out there. It's not your interview, lady.
That's the way it is at home.
Right. Do we need to get a microphone for her up here?
No, I can hear her fine.
Yeah, no, I want to, yeah. So
I mean, until she wants me to do something, I goes blank.
So you got really into playing.
Yes.
I know when I was a kid, you talk about how much you practiced. How much were you practicing? Because it's pretty crazy. No offense.
Well, it was crazy. I mean, you look back at it now. It was any time I had free time, I was down in that basement. You know.
Kind of like now.
Well, sort of.
But because one time you told me it was like 8 hours a day or something.
No, that was, well, it might have been. I'm sure it was at times. But that came, the strict 8 hours a day was when I was moved up here and took improvisation lessons with Joe Daly.
Right.
To
legendary
get
Chicago musician.
The guy. And he was a little leery. He says, well, I don't teach vibraphone. And I said, but, you know, you're the guy. And he said, well, okay, we'll give it a try. And he said, my students have to practice 8 hours a day.
8 hours a day. Wow. And you were a teacher at this point, too,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So you were teaching a full-time job plus
playing
8 hours a day.
At night sometimes.
And that's why I was neglected. Yeah.
Well, you were busy beginning to get all of these weird movies that you wanted.
Right. That's when my dad was Star Wars at that point, right? No, I'm kidding.
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that, and I had a preview, and I came home, and I said, Rob, there's a movie that we have to see. And all it was that trailer that showed an explosion in space.
Yeah, and it had the back of the Millennium Falcon. You just heard, woohoo!
Yeah, and
I remember that.
This is it.
Yeah, I remember that. So that was when you were doing like 8 hours a day, but when you were younger, it was just every free moment. Did you do anything? Like, did you have friends that you hung out with other than music at that point?
Most people didn't know what I was about.
Okay.
You know, matter of fact, my favorite story about that was we had one record store in the two towns. Well, I think it was one record store. And I would go in and order all of these jazz records and weird classical records
right.
from them. So one Christmas, my mom went down she took the Christmas list and she went down to the store and told these two nice ladies that ran that department that that I had a list of records that she wanted to get for Christmas. So they tried, and so finally at Christmas time, my mom, we're opening gifts, and she says, "Well, I'm sorry." She says, "There's one thing on the list that I could not find, and it's these records." And I said, "Well, that's all right, Mom. Those are just." There was one record store in the town, and it was a nice store, but not real hip. And these two ladies ran the records department. And that time it was records, not CDs.
Yeah, right.
And so I told Mom. She went down and ordered them. And Christmas came, and she said, I found everything on the list except the records. And I said, "Oh, what records?" And she told me, and I said, "Mom, those weren't records." So we go down to the record store to tell these ladies, because they had called the East Coast and the West Coast, and they insisted. They said, "This guy knows what he's talking about. These records exist." No, they don't. Yes, they do. And they called out in California, "Have you got these records?" No. "Well, this guy says these records are there." And so they said, "What was the name of those records?" And they said, "Black Socks." I said, "Mom, those are black socks for my tux when I worked at jobs.
It wasn't a record called Black
No, it wasn't.
Socks.
But a lot of the groups
Right,
at that time started, the Blackbirds
So
and
they're
all
calling
that.
around for the Black Socks.
Yeah,
That's
and
good.
they're nailing these big record companies. No, they've got to exist somewhere.
Yeah, this guy says it. It's
And
gotta exist.
independents weren't that big at that time, so
Right. Oh, that's really funny. So, so you mentioned like Louis Belson and that. You had
well when Illinois ISU would bring. I had these big four dances, they called them, and they would bring in named bands
okay.
twice a year.
Okay.
And of course, my drum teacher, when I was a kid, we would go into those dances and listen to the bands.
Sure.
And when I got in college, I did the same thing. I was there, standing right in front of the
Sure.
band, watching my heroes. Yeah, someone unnamed who later became a member of the family when she could be quiet. But anyway, so I would watch these guys, and right away I noticed that my goal was, I can do that. Or how did he do that? I'm going to do that.
Yeah,
And then
right.
I would go home and work on that until I could do it.
Sure.
And it would come.
Now, was there ever, because I remember specifically a couple things from when I was a kid and you practicing, was there ever anything that eluded you, that just never happened? Because I remember, this is the one that I remember. Yeah, I know you were a big fan of Buddy Rich. And
Yeah.
Buddy Rich did a lot of amazing stuff on the drums. But he did a thing where, and I might have it wrong, so you can correct me, but he did like a drum roll on the bass drum, but with like one pedal, and you were like obsessed with something like that for a while.
Oh,
weren't
well,
you?
all of the techniques I was obsessed with.
But there was something where you were trying to do it like a drum roll, 2 feet on one drum pedal or something weird
Oh,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, that was,
Did you ever accomplish it?
oh, yeah.
So was there ever anything that you didn't accomplish?
Well, when I look at some of the drum videos out now, they've taken it to...
Now, wait, you're talking about now. I'm saying
I
back
know,
then,
but
you can't
that
judge
was
what
the
you did
beginning
then
of it. You know,
versus-
like-
Well, yeah, of course. But was there anything then that you felt like you didn't accomplish? Because now, if you're judging what you did then against now, it is different.
I don't
I mean,
know.
I'm sure there's stuff now you wish, like, oh, man.
I could do better, yeah.
Yeah. But was there anything like that double pedal thing? Was there anything
Well-
that you go, I just never could figure out how to do that?
No, I think I figured it out, but they later developed better ways of doing it.
Sure.
And now I look at it and go, why couldn't I have thought of that?
Right.
You know,
Well, because it's an evolutionary process.
right.
I mean,
Like the Dave Brubeck Quartet came to my hometown the month after they were formed. They were up in here, Chicago, and they recorded Jazz Impressions of the USA.
oh, wow.
And
So
on that,
real early.
Yeah. Morello, that was his first recording with them.
Oh, really? Because Joe Morello is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing
And
drummer.
there was a drum solo called Sound of the Loop. And he did this finger thing,
Yeah.
one-handed finger roll. And so he came to town, and I didn't have the record at that time, but I got to go backstage and meet him, and he gave me
wow.
he gave me a drum lesson and showed me how to do that.
Really?
And it was like, oh my gosh. And I worked on that thing, and then the next thing I know, all of these drummers are coming to me, and I'm going, what?
How old were you when this happened?
Oh, I was...
You had to be young for that, because that album's early, isn't it?
That was 59, yeah. So
Yeah.
I was
You're a
just...
teenager.
I was ending high school.
Wow. I didn't know you met Joe Morello. I mean, I know that... Okay,
Several times, yeah.
so let's talk about some of these musicians. Who have you met? Who have you played with? Who have you met?
I
I mean, there's a lot that we've seen. I've seen
Right.
a lot, but the guys that I've met, or in your case, like who you've played with, that's what I want to know.
Well,
You mentioned Louis Belson. You mentioned Joe Morello. I'm blown away by that. I know you told me one time the one who did the album My Fair Lady. You were
Charlie Mann, yeah, he was...
you were at a camp with him, right?
Yeah, he was one of my early heroes, and the Stan Kenton band ran a camp over in Indiana, and for 2 years I went to that camp, and Shelly Mann was the drum teacher.
Wow.
And we hit it off right away. I mean, I started asking him questions about, on this record, you're using a tambourine. Well, how did you get that to do that? And he just said, Well, then the next thing I know, every time we'd have to go to these different seminars, and I'm walking home with my buddy, or back to our dorm, and Shelley had this Nash Rambler that he would come buzzing up, and he'd stop and squeal the brakes. George, get in here! Okay. And we'd get in and we'd go, and he'd talk to us, and the guitar player that used to be with Shelly Mann, Lorenzo Almeida, was in the car with him all the time. And we'd go back and we'd talk, and Shelley would do the class, and then Lorenzo Almeida took me aside and he said, George, I want to show you how I do strumming on the guitar. And he showed me this finger thing.
Okay.
It's strumming the guitar, but
right.
I was a dumb kid. I didn't know.
Right.
And it was something to.
Oh, I bet.
And he was a studio musician and famous musician in his own right.
Sure.
But Shelley was doing all of the Henry Mancini recordings, and he had his own jazz groups. He had played with Kenton and everybody you could think of. To have him take a dumb kid under his wing like that.
It's amazing. Well, I mean, like, you think about, I mentioned the My Fair Lady album. That's considered one of the great jazz albums.
Right. Well, there were several that.
Yeah, he's one of those guys.
The biggest thrill I had was the last day of the class. We had to play with a big band.
Okay.
And they gave me this special number where I played kind of like Sing, Sing, Sing.
So big drum, bum, bum,
yeah,
bum,
bum, bum, bum,
yeah.
bum. And the trumpet player was a studio guy from Chicago, excellent guy. And we tore into that thing. It was going really good. We get done, and he comes up and he says, I'm sorry, George. I'm going, what? He says, I came back in and I got off beat, but you kept it going, Well, I come off the stage and Shelley comes and grabs me and gives me this big hug,
like you did this amazing
and I'm
thing.
kind of like, what's amazing about it? You said keep the beat, and I did.
You're like, I'm just oblivious anyway.
That's right.
That's amazing.
And I was getting into some of the more adventurous jazz things, so I was used to playing in and out of time.
Sure.
So that didn't seem like a big deal.
So that leads us to that next phase. So you come to Chicago.
Yeah.
And you start taking from Joe, and he leads you to Hal Russell, who was Joe's drummer, basically.
Right.
And you start playing avant-garde jazz. Was that kind of the progression?
Well, at Illinois Wesleyan, one of my best buddies was a weirdo.
Okay, that's a surprise.
Yeah. I hung out with them all, and he was a trumpet player, and he had great stories involving him. Like he would do weird things, and at one time they told me that he was doing something with the mouthpiece, and some girl came out of the classroom and she didn't know what he was doing, and she ran into this glass door because just
funny stuff. Yeah,
but he was into Webern and the 12-tone composers, and there were all of these famous drummers that I got to meet and be around and hear stories from and listen to, and so there were a lot of influences there.
Yeah. I remember going with you down to see Louis Bellson, and I think Pete Chrisley was playing with him.
Yeah.
And that was amazing, sitting 2 feet away from him. There's just so many of those. And you saw you went and saw a lot of great bands back then.
Yeah, they were all coming through town, but we would go to see them, but they would come into town and do these dances and things like that. I went to the local trio had me come out to this restaurant at the edge of town, and after the Big Four dance, they had Maynard Ferguson, the 63 band.
What?
And all of the guys
Out
except
in Bloomington?
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
they were all there.
At the college
I mean,
and that,
yeah.
right? Yeah, wow.
I mean, I got to see all the classic
Oh,
bands.
my gosh, the 63 Maynard Band is
Oh yeah, it was
astounding.
And Rufus Jones, well,
Yeah,
he didn't come to
wow.
he didn't come to the jam session, so I was the drummer.
You were the drummer on that? Holy cow!
Yeah, well,
Yeah, you're filling in for Rufus Jones. I'm sure that was a little,
that was a tough act to follow.
But wow, holy cow!
I had lots of opportunities to.
So, okay, so I asked a question that we got off track again. I want to get back to it, but I want to go back to a question from before. Who name off some of these players? Because like right there, Maynard Ferguson. You played with Maynard Ferguson, even if it's just a jam session.
He wasn't there, but the
I
band
thought he was, but the band. It was that band.
The whole band.
What
was
about
there.
the other? Any other bands like that, or any other groups that you got to sit in with? Did
No, not really. No. I played up here. I played with a trio that was the guys from the Art Van Dam Quintet.
Okay.
And every once in a while there would be somebody in one of these bands that played with.
Yeah, played with somebody. Or, yeah.
And I knew who they were when a lot of these dance band guys had no
right.
clue, and I'd be in awe.
Yeah, right. Okay, so then we go back to the other question. I was talking to you about how you started doing avant-garde music.
Yeah, like that guy from Illinois Wesleyan got me into the 12-tone music and
Sure.
Listening to that. But that was just one part of it because I was playing in the local with my drum teacher. We were playing in the local symphony.
Okay.
And causing trouble back there. Well, all through my high school, college days, I gravitated toward the better musicians.
Sure.
And like in college, I was head of the marching drum section, and my second-hand man was the national rudimental champion from the drum corps.
Holy cow!
And he was.
Wow.
And my sister played drums, and one of my best friends.
Okay, now that was something I didn't know until this year. So
she was a good drummer.
Aunt Pat, she was a good drummer?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, she was a good drummer?
Pretty good. She kept up with us.
So it ran in the family. Was there anyone prior? Or are you really kind of where it started and it turns out there is a talent there because
I don't know. My
somehow
mom,
Aunt Pat had it.
They told me that my mom played marimba for a while before she was. Yeah, and my aunt.
She played marimba.
And my crazy aunt out in Oregon, when she was alive, she played marimba for a while, but I never heard anything.
Okay.
But one of Noonan's friends was a respected drummer also, and he told me one time that she was a good marimba player.
Really? That your mom was?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Now, there was a big marimba at my grandmother's home, and I didn't really understand. It was too elaborate. I didn't understand it at that time.
Sure.
But
wow. So it does. There might be something within the family there.
I don't know.
But if Aunt Pat had it too, that's crazy. So she played more. The only way I know it is we saw a picture where she was in the marching band.
Right.
So is that what she did? It was like.
Yeah. I don't think.
But
she wasn't into the lessons and the
sets
the jazz
and all that kind of stuff
that I know of.
Because playing a set is not an easy thing, and you see these guys play these elaborate things that. A lot of people think, I could start taking drums and I could sit down at a set and you got to know how to play that snare properly first. And guys that can play that really well, or women, it's impressive. So I didn't know that at all. Now, did Grandpa play anything?
Yeah, he played trumpet for a while. He told me that he took a couple of lessons, and about the second lesson, the teacher was a real, kind of like this movie.
Okay.
And
like Whiplash.
Yeah, and Dad said he did something wrong, and the guy walked up to him and took his shoe or boot and scraped his shin,
What?
Yeah,
way to ruin this guy.
Yeah.
Really? So
That ended
kinda
my dad's musical.
Ended it for Grandpa.
Right.
Wow.
But he was talented in a lot of other ways, so.
Yeah. Interesting. So, wow. You know what? I'm learning some interesting things. Now, what would you say is your favorite percussion to play? What is the thing that like you just really enjoy?
All of it. I really do. I
It could be-
dragged your mom to, the best one was Ali Akbar during the 60s when the Beatles,
I've never heard of them. Who?
it
No,
was
I'm
a
kidding.
local group.
Yeah, local group.
And one of the guys, where they were involved in Indian music. Ali
Okay.
Akbar Khan was
He played sitar.
he played tablas, and
Tapas.
sitar
Okay.
was.
We love tapas. We eat there
Who
all
was
the
the
time.
sitar player? The star player.
The sitar player that Ravi Shankar.
Yes,
Okay.
Ravi Shankar. So, Orchestra Hall brought in Ali Akbar Khan, the tabla player, but not
Ravi Shankar.
but another guy just as good, I guess.
Okay.
And I took her to that, and we were up in the balcony, and and they come out. They had their prayer rug, and the three of them,
Yeah.
and they sat down, and they're kind of tuning, and then
The sitar kind of tuning.
well, I mean, it was hard to tell
Yeah,
because
it is.
wasn't a song that
Yeah.
I knew, So they started, and I realized they had started. Your mom, they got to the intermission, and she said, "When are they going to start?"
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mom's not known for
No.
being real hip.
She
with
didn't
this stuff.
appreciate that stuff much.
Yeah,
but I was. Oh yeah, John Cage.
And then you also John Cage is another one that I find really interesting, and you went to one. This is a good story. Tell this story because
Well,
I love John Cage.
Well, I was into this avant-garde music. I had.
I
some
know that's
books.
where I got it from.
I had some books. I've got a book yet that has fur music.
Yeah, you know what? You used to have it on the shelf,
Right.
and I read that, and it had the fur in the book,
Right.
And you could rub on it to hear the different tones of the fur. I did a lot. I thought it was cool.
And then my trumpet friend at Illinois Wesleyan had me writing tone rolls for 12-tone music.
Yep, I had to do that too.
Okay, well, that was,
I thought that stuff was cool.
yeah, right. So where were we with John
We were talking about
Cage?
John Cage.
So I got onto this John Cage thing, and I found out he was going to be at the University of Illinois for a lecture
Okay.
demonstration. So we hot-footed down there, and it happened that my brother-in-law, who was older than us, but he was down there for a convention or something, and he was going to come in and meet us.
Okay.
So we're in there, and Cage walks out, and he has a throat mic on,
Okay.
and he has 4 blenders
Okay.
with microphones on them.
Okay.
And he starts cutting up vegetables and stuff and dumping it into these blenders, and then he turns them on. And I mean, he had huge speakers.
So you're getting the different sounds of all the different types of things going in the blender.
It was more than sounds. It was
Really loud?
man, oh wow, was it? And it just went on and on and on.
Now, were you sitting there wide-eyed, or were you even
Oh.
thinking this is a little weird? Because I would sit there wide-eyed. This sounds great to me.
Yeah. Of course, my brother-in-law opens up the door and looks in and goes, "What the heck?"
Yeah.
He got out of there until.
Well, this is a guy that would watch Lawrence Welk and think that's cutting
Right,
edge.
yeah.
So that's pretty funny.
But they already knew that I was
Weird.
offbeat. So.
Yes. So I've got a couple of more questions here.
Yeah.
One thing is, I know that you mentioned you play classical, you play various forms of jazz. Have you pretty much dabbled in most forms of music? Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you play any ethnic stuff, or did you ever play with a sitar player to see what that was like? or-
No, I didn't know anybody that played sitar.
But if you had, you would have jumped
Oh
in.
yeah,
right?
I would like to have. I researched it a little bit, but
Sure.
unless you get into it, it's with somebody. It's kind of hard to
Yeah, right.
do that.
Can't just go find somebody, pick it up, and
And I
it's got to be somebody who really knows.
I researched the tabla technique, but I really didn't have it down. And
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and if you're not using it,
Right.
it's got to be very difficult.
right.
So, now did you ever dabble in like rock or anything like that?
Yeah. When I was in high school, Illinois Wesleyan called me up and they said, "We got this rock band and they want you to play drums."
Okay.
I said, I don't do that, you know. I mean, that,
Right.
at that time, a jazz musician would.
Well, that would have been the 50s.
Late
so,
50s.
Late 50s. So
It
this
was
is pre
still-
Beatles, just to give people
It sure
a time
was.
frame.
It was, and it was not a. I don't know the rest of the guys, but the leader played tenor.
Okay.
A young guy. He was pretty good at doing that, but he was drinking and playing. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, "What the heck am I going to do to play this stuff?" Well, the first thing we take off. And I
Yeah.
thought I was going to break my hand trying to.
Trying to keep up with that kind of playing.
And the guy kept coming over to me.
Well, it's repetitive with rock.
Yeah.
It's really repetitive.
Especially that. That was.
Yeah, just-
that was that early. What those classic
Yeah,
rocks
the-
before the Beatles and.
Yeah, the 50s.
Yeah, it was.
Bill Haley stuff and
Yeah, not even that good, I don't think. But
Yeah.
you know, and I was kind of mortified that I was playing with this kind of stuff. I thought, don't let any of the guys from my jazz group come in and see me.
yeah, so you're doing this, slumming it.
But, you know, I'm doing this, and this guy would come over on every tune, and he would bring the saxophone right in my side of my face, and he's blowing, and it's leaking beer.
Oh,
And I go, please let this night end.
you know what? That was revenge for all the sax players that had to sit in second chair tenor that had the drummer sitting there
Yeah,
playing right next to their ears. So
Yeah.
that was revenge from the sax players. I'll take that. Okay, the movie Whiplash. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay,
So
I liked it.
you liked it. Now, what were your thoughts? Did they get it right? Was
No.
Was the kid's experience as a drummer accurate? Because I had a problem with it with the teacher.
Yeah.
There's no way a guy at a conservatory is acting that way.
That's
And
what
it
my
going
thought was.
on.
That's what my thought was, too.
But the experience of the kid, and I don't mean the experience with the teacher, but the practicing, the obsessiveness, the listening. Like,
Yeah, that was
endlessly.
me,
Okay.
but I never, to a point where my hands were bleeding.
That was dramatic effect.
Right. But the intensity of trying to do something to get it right. Like when Morello, I was backstage with him and he showed me this 2-finger roll. You know, well, I just about fell on the floor. I got to do that.
Yeah, right.
And it was a quest. It took me about a month before I could start doing it.
Wow.
You know, to get, and even then it wasn't.
So it's a kind of thing, even though they show you the technique, it's kind of like magicians, how they have to keep using their fingers to get that trick down.
Right.
You think that, they learned the trick and they do it. They got to do it for a while before they can actually pull it off.
Well,
so drumming is similar.
These guys that were coming into town had been doing it for a number of years, and you know.
Yeah, right. Okay, big question. We're getting towards the end. here.
Okay.
Who would you say is the finest drummer you can think of?
There's too many different ones. I was just
And
telling.
they're all so different, yeah.
Yeah, and different techniques, different styles, different.
Name 5 guys that light you up. That you'll pick up any album with them just to explore that album.
Oh, Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, some of the new guys. I don't even
There's
have
a
all
lot
their
of new
names.
guys, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the new ones are picking up techniques past what they were doing.
Yeah.
But you know, of course, Belson and Rich and Krupa and you know, Krupa was a little older, but I remember at one convention, I was like about as far as from here to where your mom is, and there he was.
About 30 feet away.
Yeah, and I was thinking I should go over and talk to him because he had studied with this drum teacher in Chicago I studied with, and
Okay.
I
Oh, sure. So you have something to talk about.
I was going to say something, and nobody was nobody was coming up to the guy.
To Gene Krupa.
Yeah, which
Wow.
was amazing to me. And I was just kind of awed, and I just sat there and looked at him, and he looked at me, and I know he thought, well, come on over, kid.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
But I didn't, and I regret that,
Oh, really?
but
That's a regret you've got, huh?
yeah. And when we were in Washington, D.C., Rufus Jones lived there. Well, I looked up his phone number, but I couldn't get him, and it turned out he had died the
Oh,
month
wow.
before.
But you did do the, you were a diligent stalker, so that's something else I hope doesn't run in the family.
No, there were a lot of, I'm thankful I got to meet Shelley Mann and have that
Sure.
interaction with him, Mel Lewis, who?
Sonny Payne?
Sonny Payne, oh, yeah.
Oh, you met Sonny Payne.
Oh, a lot of times.
Sonny Payne's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, all these guys you're naming. I mean, you know that because of you, I have a real appreciation for percussion. And I can tell the difference between a good drummer and an average drummer. And the guys you're naming are all
Well, it wasn't just drummers, though.
guys. When I see their name in the liner notes, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to be excited.
This is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not just drummers. It's like because I played saxophone, I gravitate towards the saxophone players. But you give me, I'll take anybody that's good
Right.
at anything, man.
Like-
I'll take a good sitar player.
We were sitting down at a wedding, and the band came over, and we got talking, and we started telling them about going up to Chicago and seeing some of the small groups, like
Yeah.
Miles Davis, and I said, oh yeah, we sat this close to Miles Davis,
Yeah.
John Coltrane, and the classic John Coltrane.
I can't even imagine.
Ornette Coleman.
I can't even imagine.
And these
I mean,
guys are you were that close. I said, oh man.
Coltrane and Coleman are probably my 1 and 2 right there.
We saw the first time we saw Coleman. He was in some college, and he was in this suit, and it was like a patchwork
Okay.
coat.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted one of those so bad.
Right. Well, he designed his clothes, didn't
Right,
he?
right.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
It reminds me when I was dating Martha. Well, we might have been married. We went down and we got to see Phil Woods.
Yeah.
And I saw a number of these guys too, like Sonny Rollins a number of
Sure.
times. But we saw Phil Woods, and it was down at the Jazz Showcase, and we sat in the front row. I mean, Phil Woods was 5 feet from me. And when he was playing, to me, this is the thing that got me. I could hear his tone through the horn instead of through the speakers.
Right.
Because I was so close, I could hear the horn, and it was just killing me. I love
It's
that.
a different feeling.
Yeah, it really is. And being in the presence of these guys that play like that, it's just
Well, same thing with we saw Stravinsky at
really
Orchestra Hall.
wow.
And-
Oh, I bet that was amazing.
It was his last performance. And I snuck a
Really?
camera in thinking, I'm going to take pictures of his last performance. And it was an old German black and white thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm taking all these pictures. I get home, we get it developed. I'd left the lens cap on. But,
You know what? Nobody called Time Magazine. We don't have the pictures.
yeah, never mind. They aren't as good as I thought.
It was a dark and stormy night.
But, I mean, the same thing, sitting in or near an orchestra, the
yeah.
same thing.
Yeah, yeah. Sitting around that greatness is
And
really
some
amazing.
of the marching bands and concert bands and things like that
yeah.
when they're top notch.
Yeah, when they're top notch, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention?
No,
or- I think this was great, Dad. Thank you so
well, thank
much.
you.
This was really special to me to
We're proud of you guys.
be able to talk about this, and don't lie.
Okay.
Just thank you. I really enjoyed
Cut that
it.
part out of the tape.
It's not tape anymore. Listen to him, old man. All right, that's it. Thank you so much,
Thank
Dad.
you.
Let's hear it for George Southgate. Thank you, Blue Box.